If you'd asked me pretty much any day between the day after the 22 election and the day before the 25 election, I probably would have given you the same answer if you'd asked what was going to happen in this election, which is, I would bet it's going to be a Labour minority government. It seemed like a pretty safe bet. I just did think that Labour was doing such a good job that they were going to be that popular this election. I was pretty positive on the general swing that Australia was doing after the last election. I thought it was kind of a sign that the Liberals were on the way out and that we may be transitioning away from the Liberals entirely. And then sort of as the years went on, up until the point where the polls were showing that Liberals were leading in the polls, I was like, okay, obviously that's a bit of a getting ahead of yourself. Like, it's too easy to go ahead and think that it's going to be one election happens and it's going to totally change the face of Australian politics. And it's now surprising, now that the election has happened, that it's actually that assertion that in the hopeful days after the 2022 election, after 3 consecutive coalition governments, that optimism, now the coalition might be just the party that Australia could never go back to. The Labor government's now the base case. It almost seems like that's almost true. Not quite in a lot of different ways, but it's almost true. And I'm shocked at this election that not only is it a Labor majority government, they have not only extended their lead, it's almost a historic win for them. Labor is on track to get 94 seats in this upcoming term, which is enough to equal the blowout 1996 election from John Howard, which in some ways is more impressive because there were less seats. So getting 94 is more impressive, but it's also a coalition, so it's less impressive. So I'm pretty shocked at this. And the main reason that I'm shocked at this isn't necessarily because of anything even within Australia itself. So when you have to think of how Australia and the Labor Party sit in the broader space of like the whole world. We're a very global society now, we're very interconnected. I get a feeling that me, along with most people, feel that right now, globally, we're going through some kind of tough times. Maybe people don't understand how widespread and global that seems. And people don't tend to think of things that way. They tend to think, do I feel like I'm doing well versus when this government was elected? And that's usually just how they just vibe out, like how they're doing. But in general, people are generally pretty mad right now about the state of not just the country, but I think the world. And obviously that is mostly shown in articles like this. 2024, the year of anti-incumbency. 2024, 3.7 billion voters and 72 elections. And pretty much every single one of them showed that people are not happy with whatever government is in power. Whether it's more progressive, whether it's more conservative. I think this here is a sign. And, I've been reading some books that kind of reinforce this view. So I'm kind of in this mind space right now, but I'm in this sort of space where I feel like not only is just like Australia got a lot of problems that people might get angry about that I thought maybe would have some backlash to Labor. Feels like the whole world, people are very angry and people are just switching back and forth between their 2 major parties. And some countries are just getting more and more fed up, and then they start going more and more to the fringes to get more radical parties on both sides of the spectrum. As they get fed up with things just not enough, because it seems like times are tough. It seems like there's been global economic problems. There's global recessions looming, especially being triggered by the US. There's been just a big COVID hangover and changes with like global shipping, and now we've got the tariffs, and inequality has just been getting worse and worse. As we see companies going to all-time highs, we see people getting to all-time heights of their riches and huge asset values, but it feels like most people feel like day to day things aren't necessarily getting better. So we've had problems like this where we see a big rejection of mainstream parties. So that's why I found it shocking to see a historic defeat by the Liberal Party. The scale of this defeat is insane. When we look at the national level, it doesn't look that crazy, 34, but it is actually a massive victory. And we look at the states. Queensland is the only state here, 50.6 to the coalition, that is still leading the coalition. So our most conservative state, and they're just eking out a coalition victory. Some of them aren't so crazy, 55 in New South Wales and Victoria, WA 55 as well. What's more crazy? SA. biggest victory by any political party in the history. ACT was expected to obviously go to Labour. 70%. That is a smashing by the coalition, rather. And almost more surprising, as a more conservative state, Tasmania, nearly 2/3 on the two-party preferred vote. That's an insane just destruction of the Liberal Party nationwide. Obviously, we've seen after the last election, a lot of the state governments went the way of the Labor government as well, and we have a majority Labor across the states as well. Next election next year, SA is definitely going to hold a Labor because they're very popular right now, and Victoria. And Victoria is, of course, expected to be Labor in general. They may not, but it's expected. They're the most popular state. Greens get the highest vote count of any state in Victoria because they are generally the most progressive. And sometimes it's a bit hasty to look at this and to call that a party is going to fade off to obscurity, because a major party in these, essentially two-party country where it's just been these two again and again as the two major parties since like World War II at least. Some party turned into the coalition really, but generally it's been the same thing. And to see one party almost seems like it's on the brink of its disappearance, still pretty crazy. I'm not convinced that's going to happen, mainly just because I don't see a contender to replacing the coalition. Like I said, it feels like a lot of people, a lot of countries are showing that far-right groups are rising in popularity as the centre-right ones sort of seem to dip in their vote counts. And I think that's a sign that as people start to get mad, and especially you see often immigrants are a big target of, as soon as things get tough, immigrants are usually first down the line of things that are going to get targeted. And right-wing parties are obviously going to be much more anti-immigrant than more left-wing parties are. So that's an aspect. And just when times are tough, you feel like people will definitely radicalize to both sides of the political spectrum, but you feel like the right wing sort of has a little bit of an edge there. So we did see a little bit of a rise in the One Nation vote, but not as much as I would have feared. It just seems like really the coalition is just incredibly unpopular. This is such a bad election for them. Surprised almost that there wasn't a bigger swing to One Nation as we saw in like the UK, where Reform is now overtaken their more establishment Conservative Party. We're not seeing that at all. It just seems like literally nobody but Labour is just getting these votes. That's partly part of the preferential voting system we have here, which I wouldn't change for the world, but that can be part of it as well. So like I said, when I was sort of expecting that the coalition, I was expecting this election really up the entire time, really. I was expecting that there to be a drop in the Labour vote, because people, the big problems with like cost of living, with housing, with global inflation, these problems haven't improved really under Labour. That's not necessarily their fault. It's a big issue, and I think it calls to a kind of deep rot, not only within Australia but also globally. And I thought that would manifest in a lower vote share for Labour. But it seems like people were more pissed off with the coalition than they were disappointed in Labour. And I do say disappointed in Labour. I don't think that they were such a great government that they inspire the confidence for them to have a record-setting election. I'm not surprised they won, but I'm surprised how big their win was. And of course, if you're a big Labour fan, then you think that's ridiculous. You think that they are obviously a very good government, and me saying a government that's done pretty well. Labour is a good government. And me saying that they don't have the confidence and they weren't inspiring to people obviously will sound very wrong to some people, but that's just generally what I feel. I feel this is obviously a big rejection of the coalition, and even though Labour did gain more, I think that is a byproduct of a rejection of the coalition, not necessarily a huge endorsement of Labour. Labour do have a huge mandate now. They can necessarily do what they want, and I don't think they're going to fully take advantage of it with any big policies. But that remains to be seen. That could be very naive. Obviously, if that was correct, then you would see what I predicted come true, where you would see more of the minor parties grow in vote share. But really, Greens pretty much stayed flat, and One Nation grew a little bit. So it looks a lot worse for Greens than it really was. Their vote share stayed pretty much stable. Obviously, with like Adam Brandt's seat being lost, that's a big blow to the party. Him as a leader, who I think was pretty well respected, in his seat, he still won most of the votes of any person in the Melbourne electorate. So obviously, that's obviously one of the clearer examples of the way that the coalition vote, flowing more to Labor than the Greens, obviously screwed the Greens over more. The Greens don't necessarily want to replace Liberals as Labor's opposition. They want to replace Labor as the Liberals' opposition. So when Liberals do badly, then Labor does well, and Labor will sort of steal some of the votes from the Greens. So anytime Labor does badly, that's when you're going to see Greens, because Greens want to sort of replace Labor, not replace the Liberals. I would expect that probably next election, I can't imagine it's going to get better for Labor. This is essentially a historic win. Even though they're equaling the amount of seats that John Howard did in 1996, the Liberals' loss is way worse than the Labor's loss in that election. So Labor is on way more of the back foot on the federal level and on the state level than the Labor were back then. Obviously, it would be a bit naive to say that Labor here, after their historic defeat, were going to fade off to obscurity. And that's why I'm not willing to say that this is the same for the Liberals. I don't want to say that the Liberals aren't going to come back, because they definitely can. It's hard to say. Next election is probably make or break for them. But like I said, the minor parties didn't make up as much headway as I thought they would. So that leads me to think that there's not going to be much of an alternative. I think that Labor is not going to deal with a huge, massive surge in One Nation, even if One Nation grows in popularity massively. If things get way worse, if people get even more turned off to immigration, even with Labor slowing immigration, then I don't see One Nation taking that away from Coalition right now, and I don't see Coalition making the gains to make a actual charge at winning government next term. It's that bad a defeat. Things can change quickly, and a lot of people, and the most of the electorate really is a fickle person, and I sort of feel like most people make up their mind on elections. Either they've made up their mind way ahead of time and they don't think about it, or they just sort of base off the vibes they get the week before the election. So I don't want to do too much analysis on what the parties are doing and how that's going to be perceived by the median voter, because I think the median voter just rocks up in the day and just figures out on vibes. And I think the media and just the events that happen just before the election, I think are going to be way more important than how the Liberal Party look right now. So I don't want to make too much of a assertion about that, but it does feel that they are definitely in a pretty rough spot, and they really need to turn it around. Obviously, they have their new party leader. She seems to be a pretty middling vote. Obviously, the other candidate for the Liberal leadership would have been a little bit more radical, which could go either way. The more radical you go, the more risky it is. It could go either way. And I don't want to say, it's easy when you see a very strong centre-left party result and you see a rejection of a centre-right party, especially a party that you see sort of tried to maybe ride the coattails of Donald Trump, which is a far-right party currently, and to get rejected, and then to sort of be a little bit too eager to write off the right wing in a given country. But I don't think that's the case. It wasn't long ago that the polls were looking much better for the coalition. And I think with people, the opinions can change really quickly. I think these polls are going to switch pretty quick on Labor. I think the cost of living in Australia is going to show that the perception of how happy people are with the government doesn't necessarily match the huge blowout that Labor just did. I think pretty soon we're going to see polls come back similar, but maybe not as bad, because I think we've got a better government than the UK Labor Party. That's for sure. But in a similar way that Labor had a huge victory and immediately the polls have turned against them. I think we're going to see something similar to that. just because I don't see Labor doing enough ambitious to keep people interested. Obviously, people disagree. A lot of Labor voters think that in the real world, when you have to deal with, majority of people and not trying to rock the boat too much, you want to stay electable. It's just not realistic to make big scale changes. And Albo himself has said in interviews he thinks that Labor is a ambitious government. They've been ambitious the last election cycle, and they think they've been ambitious this next one. I would disagree. I'm sure to them, they are thinking they're doing the best for the country. I'm sure. I mean, apart from they've got their corporate donors and mining lobbies and stuff. I'm sure in some ways they want to do more, but they can't because they've taken money from huge corporations that want them to not move too fast on climate change, for example. But apart from that, they generally think that this is all part of playing the game. They need the donations. This is the best way forward. They want to stay in power so they can do the most, and if they do too much, then they're going to get scared off. That's going to work if times are good. If times get worse, and I don't think times are doing too good right now. And I think articles like this show that. Whether you're in the US, the UK, you're in Germany, you're in France, wherever you are, things aren't doing too good, I don't think. I think we're on the brink of maybe a bit of a change in the global system where we find out that a lot of the rot that's been building in the background can no longer keep going. I don't know if that's going to be in the next 3 years. I don't know if someone like Trump is going to trigger that within his term, or if it's going to need to fester for another decade or two before we really feel the consequences. In which case, maybe Labor's going to do well. But at some point, I think things are going to get worse. And is Labor equipped to deal with that if it does? I don't know. I don't believe it. I think that Labor could be a bit more bold in general. I don't think it's unrealistic for Labor to be a little bit more bold, and I don't think that I think they could do more than they currently are. And I don't think that nowadays, as things have got worse, as the housing crisis has gotten worse, as the climate crisis has gotten worse, I don't think the things that have scared off people in the past necessarily need to be things that they need to be scared of now. So we'll see. That's my particular theory. I think people are still not so happy with how the world is right now with cost of living. It seems like we're in a very turbulent time, and turbulent times aren't a time for just reform, easygoing, don't rock the boat too much, small steps governments, which I think Labour will do. I think they're a good government. They're still one of the best in the world, to be clear. So, some just be like, realistically, they don't get that much better than Labour, but I still think we can all claim, no matter what government's in power, no matter how good they are compared to other countries, I think we can all claim we can always ask for more. And that's personally what I think. I think we'll still see a Labour government next term as well, unless things get real bad. But even if things get real bad, no other party is really challenging them at this point. I'm hopeful for the next 3 years. I think it'll be a good government. I think that a lot of the cost of living problems are more global than just Albo and the Labour Party can deal with, and those problems will continue to get worse until either they get fixed by the powers that be, or things get bad enough that more radical parties and more radical ideas of how to fix things start getting more votes. I don't know if that's going to be the next 3 years, if that's going to be in the next 10 years. Obviously, house prices are not going to go down. Labor has no intention of making house prices go down. I think they've been scared off. Again, I think things have changed enough that they could actually try to tackle the housing crisis. And that wouldn't necessarily, even if they just want to do it because they think it's the right thing to do. That's personally what I would like, but obviously that's not what Labor want to do, and they don't want to rock the boat too much. So Labor, Albo's talked about this is a supply issue. They need supply. I don't really see how any of their policies are meant to actually tackle that. It just seems like it's a lot of words to try to get renters' votes without pissing off people who own a house. But there's almost no way that you can fix how rotten the housing market is right now and the systems that have caused this housing crisis. And there's no way now to fix the housing crisis without causing pain to some people. So when you're promising to help everyone get a house cheaply, affordably. At the same time, you're trying not to scare people that their house prices are going to go down. There's just nothing that's going to happen. So I believe that Labor is going to continue to prioritize just old boomers who have investment properties. I don't think I'm going to be able to afford a house this next election cycle, unless the housing market literally destructs, in which case, Labor's going to do everything they can to stop that happening. I think the main example I think of when I think of how Labor's maybe not equipped to deal with the severity of big problems when they become big problems is when obviously the Greens lost 3 of their 4 seats, and there was a lot of venomous words against the Greens from Albo, who's obviously a lot of animosity there, and he attributed that, especially Max's loss, to the electorate maybe turning against Max's more obstructionist view to Labor against especially the housing bill they have. I don't really feel like the Australian public really even thinks about stuff that deeply. I bet most people in his electorate didn't even know who he was and what he voted for and what the HAF even is. So I feel like that maybe the Australian voters and people more vibes based than Albo's giving them credit for. But even so, I mean, it still feels strange for Albo to get up there to talk about how ambitious his government is and to criticise Max for getting a little bit more added into the HAF bill, as if the HAF bill is going to make even a single percentage of difference to the problems that we have in the housing market right now. So to say that Max, Adam, or anyone in the Greens Party were against public housing getting built, I would generally say, what public housing? Because you weren't going to build fuck all, mate. In fact, I believe the percentage of social housing in Australia is meant to go down in Australia even after the HAF, even after Greens made adjustments to it. So I don't know where this ambitious government that Albo is talking about when he talks about these kinds of things. But obviously he thinks that this is the best way forward. Greens will have to have a chat behind the scenes on whether they want to continue to push Labor as much as they have been in the Senate. Obviously they've got less people in the lower house, but they can still hold some balance of power in the Senate, so they still can have some demands. I don't feel like this election, especially with how the preferential vote has screwed Greens over a little bit more, considering that their vote share is pretty similar to where it was last election. I feel like this election is not an indictment of the Greens, of their politics, of the way that they go about trying to push Labor to be a little bit more bolder in their left-wing policies. I don't feel like this election is an indictment of that. And I don't feel like, obviously, it's Labor generally sees otherwise, and they think that this is a sign that they need to be more in lockstep with Labor and not to try and rock the boat too much. Obviously, Labor thinks that their way is the best way, so they should be doing the same if they want to do best for Australia. And obviously, the Greens don't think that. But I don't know what they're going to do, if they're going to think that they need to vote a little bit more conservatively to try and get on the good side of Labor, where they feel like they need to get on the good side of the Australian public. That's up for them to decide. I just don't feel like this is an indictment of the kind of politics that the Greens have been doing this last election cycle, though. So we'll have to wait and see. Liberals, much bigger issue. I don't know where they're going to go. I feel like I can't imagine it's going to either they're going to slowly crawl their way back or they're going to fade off to obscurity. Because if they are right on the brink of pretty much not existing anymore if they have another terrible election. And if there was another third party that was looking to replace them, like another right-wing party that was looking to replace them, then I would say that their days are numbered. But there isn't right now. So if I was to take a bet right now, I bet that they're going to come back a bit stronger next election. And I think elections, they're fickle things, and they often respond to what happens in the world around them, of course. We didn't see a huge Trump effect here in Australia. Definitely nowhere near the Canadians did. We may have a little bit. Obviously, we saw the polls switch around just around that time, but it just seems like people just really didn't like Dutton and didn't seem like the Trump effect really was that bad. So it's hard to say. I think if there are going to be more global issues that affect the next election, it's going to be like just the continual global inflation problems, like a global recession triggered by the US, just Donald Trump fucking up the economy with tariffs. Who knows? It could be, we could be in for a wild ride. And if things get wild, then it's gonna make the next election even more crazy. If we have a stable few years, then we think we can expect more of the same for the next few years. Well, that was a big, long, rambling ramble. So yeah, interesting election. Huge blowout by Labour. Did not see it coming. They have the mandate of the people to do what they want. We'll see what they do with it. I think we're in for a interesting few years as far as the global politics goes. But will Australia's politics be interesting? I don't know. It seems like Labour's not that interesting. But if things start to get more and more hairy, if people start to get more and more bad, maybe we'll see something change. I'll keep you updated, and I'll see you in the next one.